you are separated and you're exhausted and there's conflict between you and your ex and you're not sure about what to do next, how to resolve the conflict around, who's having the children when. You don't know how to resolve conflict around who's paying for what. You don't know how it works with property settlement, what will happen with the house, with your superannuation, with your cars. Will you be able to keep living in the home, yes or no? There are so many things to think about and it's overwhelming. When you separate, you have to think about all the logistics around the kids, the legalities around your finances, what you might think you feel should happen or is fair, but what the law might say. And then on top of all of that, it is a highly emotional time of your life. You could be very hurt. Even if you make the decision to separate, it's a very difficult process. A lot of my clients feel that they failed or they did something wrong or just you're just grieving the relationship. If you've been together for a really long time, you didn't plan to separate. This was not the plan. And now you're in that and you're like, how did we get there? Sometimes it's also really not your decision. Someone cheated on you or someone, your partner wanted to separate and you really didn't want that. And then you still have to deal with everything that comes with separation while you did not choose the situation. And there's so many things going on and you're overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. And this is where we come in at Life Mediation. Myself and Liz, we are great at supporting people through separation. We understand that this is a really difficult process. Might be a really traumatic experience for you as well. It's stressful, it's hard, and it's really important to get the right guidance. From my point of view, the first 12 months of separation are really, really important. Anecdotally, what I often see is kind of two things. So all people, the first 12 to 18 months, it's really quite hard. There's emotions, but people make good agreements, they work on themselves, they do some healing, things get on track. And after that time, everyone kind of settles in. It doesn't mean people go to the pub together or have coffee every day, but they can show up together to extracurricular activities. They can go to doctor's appointments together. They can communicate effectively about the kids and the kids can go peacefully between two homes. The finances have been settled and everything's just kind of falling a little bit more into place and everyone can move on with their life. The other version that I see is in the first 12 months of separation that lots of things go wrong. So it could be really bad advice. So everyone is an expert on separation, wants to tell you what you should do. Also, people project their experience of their separation on you and tell you that is how it is. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You have your children, your finances, so you can't compare apples with pears, and you can make the decision with your ex-partners that you want to make for your family. So don't get dragged into other people's emotions or experiences of their separations, and be really careful who you get your advice from. Even professionals, they are there to give advice, and I'm all for it. I'm a professional myself in this space. But in the end of the day, I always say to my clients, I might have some advice for you, but you, in the end of the day, have to make the decision because you living this, these are your children and this is your life. So make sure that you get advice, but then that you make the decision, that you don't blindly follow this advice. So what I sometimes see happen is things like, people start taking money out of bank accounts for good or bad reasons. That's not really the point, but withholding children, whatever it might be. And things sometimes escalate from zero to hero in a very short space of time. And then people come and see me and we have to then, wheel back from that. And that's a little bit harder than when you come to mediation before it all escalates. What's so powerful about mediation is this. In mediation, there is a neutral mediator like myself or Liz who will sit with you. So you do an intake session where you can tell your story to us and we listen and we can prepare you for the mediation session. We'll help you, to guide you and tell you what you would need to prepare for the session. We explain the process to you and, we'll make sure that you feel comfortable with everything that's going on. So you might need to go and do some homework or see some professionals or do something before the mediation session. And then we have an intake session with your ex-partner as well. And we do the same thing. So we're not here to be on anyone's side, but we are on the children's side. So we really do ask difficult questions and, hopefully guide you through a agreement that really works for everyone, but especially for the children. And then you have to join mediation session. Joint mediation sessions can be with or without lawyers. It's really up to what both of you think is the most beneficial and also what we think is going to work. So together with our clients, we'll work out and tailor the process to their needs. So when the mediation is without lawyers, we do that in a face-to-face setting or in a Zoom setting, and we work out, in separate rooms, in rooms together, and then we help you work through one by one all the topics that you need to talk about. So I always ask people to come with the topics that they want to talk about. Then we set an agenda and we work on one topic at a time. And that's really important as well. When people are in conflict, what happens is often everything gets bunched up in a bowl. It's all one big thing and then they can't make agreements. So part of our jobs is to separate out, well, this is this and this is that and there's that. And then you can work through these topics one by one, because that's a much more effective way to resolve conflict. When you come up with agreements, we will type up these agreements, and then in a mediation session, you can talk about what are you going to do with these agreements. Are you going to lodge them with the family court? Are you going to keep it as a parenting plan if it's about kids, and things like that. With finances, we'll work through your assets and liability schedule, and then you can talk about who's been getting what. We draft an agreement and with spreadsheets, and again, then we'll talk about what are you going to do with that agreement. When there's no lawyers present, we don't tend to sign anything on the day because everyone needs to be able to go away and get things checked. And then, like I said, in the mediation session, we'll make sure that you have an agreement about what you're doing after the mediation session so you don't get in conflict about that. When lawyers are present, it's a little bit different. Often it's a half-day mediation, but more often than not, it's a full-day mediation where you work through all the issues at hand. There's a little bit of preparation between the lawyers and myself before the sessions, and then also in the sessions, what happens is that the agreements get drafted up there and then, and most of the time they get signed on a day and then lodged with the family court, that afternoon or the next morning. It's not a requirement. You can obviously always think about something. You can always leave it and not sign it on a day. There's no pressure for me to do that, but that's just often why people like lawyer-assisted mediation, because they have legal advice on the spot and the lawyers can draft the agreements there and then, and everything is done and dusted, which for some people is a really big relief. The power of making agreements is huge. So the scenario what I talked about before is when people have things escalate from zero to hero really quickly and then get into the cycle of, seeing mediators, seeing lawyers, going to court, spending lots of money, and the conflict keeps escalating often because the more horrible things happen, the more of a horrible view you have of each other, the more you can't communicate, and people get resentful when they have to communicate through lawyers and through courts, and it's expensive. It's a horrible experience. Like, I do not wish going to court on anyone, and that's the honest truth. Court is there for a reason, and I think it's fabulous that it's there, and judges do an amazing job. But man, I mean, myself, I would do anything to stay out of there. You hand your decisions about what is going to happen to your family in the future over to an absolute stranger, even though these people are amazing and intelligent, but you tell them your story and your point of view, and then they make a decision about it. In mediation, you get to make a decision and you still have self-determination, which is a really big difference. So that's really important. I have never seen parents that have gone through the family court end up with a better relationship, because what happens is everyone has to write affidavits about each other and reasons why they can't have the children, or they need the kids more, or why they need more money, or whatever it is. So those affidavits and those kind of stories that everyone is telling in court are not particularly nice. So most of the time the relationship between co-parents absolutely deteriorates by going through the family court. And then afterwards, you get handed your consent orders. Great. Makes a massive difference to have agreements in place. I think making agreements and making agreements early is the solution to not getting into high conflict. However, when you've been through this long process, expensive, traumatic process to get to that point, then afterwards it doesn't mean your conflict is over. People have this notion that the family court will resolve everything, but the reality is, if you want to fight, you can fight. So this is why they have brought in parenting coordination now, which is a new process to help people already have consent orders in place to resolve conflict, because you can fight about anything. And some of those people I see, they really hate each other and they're really entrenched in their conflict. The kids are at psychologists. Sometimes people even lose their house for the amount of legal fees they have. But it's traumatic, it's stressful, it's long and ongoing, and it has a huge impact on your children's future and yours. So in mediation, what we're trying to do is to get you to come to agreements, be very clear on what's going on. And even when you have just separated, right, and you don't know anything about your long-term future yet, come to mediation and make some interim agreements just about what's happening in the next 6 months, like how we're going to pay the bills, who's going to live where for now until we've done financial separation, what are we going to do with the kids for now until we work things out. So then everyone knows what's happening. Because what's often happening as well is, for example, what I see very often is that one parent feels that they have no power and no say about what happens with the kids. And they say, why does the other parent get to decide what, is happening with our children? They're our children and I don't get to see them as much as I want to, for example. Or I have to constantly ask and negotiate. And the tension keeps growing. You have to negotiate then every week. So one parent is asking all the time, the other parent feels harassed and it's like, I need some space or something like that. And things just keep escalating. When you put those agreements in place for the first 6 months, so to speak, then you have something you're doing. You know it's not permanent. You know you will review it, but you have something in place so everything can calm down. You can both do a bit of healing, have a bit of distance. You don't have to negotiate every week. And, the kids also know what's happening, because routine and knowing what's going on is very important for everyone, including your children. The children have not chosen this separation and they will be sad as well. So they need support in going through this. And the great thing is that separation doesn't have to be traumatic for them. No one likes it, but if you don't have entrenched conflict, your kids are going to thrive like any other kids will. So that is the main aim of mediation, to make sure that you get clear agreements so you don't get entrenched conflict. Sometimes I see parents fight about one night more or less, and I totally understand, right? I want to see my kids every day of the week and fight for that possibly. But the one night here or there for the children probably doesn't make the biggest difference. What makes the biggest difference for them is having parents that are not in conflict and then just can be acting like adults and can just, be at important events for them. I have, over the years, have worked with child inclusive practitioners, and they've spoken to kids and brought that to mediation. And most of the time, kids say things like, I just want mum and dad to get along. I just want to be normal. I don't want to have all this tension. I just want them to be nice to each other. So the basics. So that's what your children would want. They want a peaceful situation where they can just go peacefully between two houses, and not on top of already also grieving the separation and having their parents not be together and possibly moving house and all these things, also have to deal with their parents' conflict. So if you want to resolve your conflict, if you want to get clarity, if you want to know what you're doing for your future, your long-term or your short-term future, mediation is really the way forward. We hold space for you. We have no judgment. We help you come up with agreements so you know what you're doing. So there's no conflict. Like I said before, we can manage communication. Also in mediation, we talk about communication. What is the communication going to look like now you are separated? Because it's an interesting concept, I find, that people think, now people often separate because they actually couldn't communicate. And now they're supposed to be these amazing communicators as co-parents. It makes absolutely no sense, right? So we actively work on the communication. Like, how are you going to communicate now? When are you going to communicate, and about what? So there will be new boundaries in place. There will be new rules. You still are in a relationship, but a co-parenting relationship, no longer a romantic one. And what you don't want is for you guys to keep overstepping each other's boundaries. So that's really important. Mediation is where you get support from your mediator. You get an opportunity to say what you need to say and to work through difficult issues. So there is space to talk about things you might normally not be able to talk about with your ex-partner. It's an opportunity to really work out what's important for both of you and how you can support your kids through this and yourself as well. It's an opportunity to make agreements for the long-term and short-term future. And, you can always come back to review it. It's flexible. It's addressing your needs. If you go to court, they just give you a date. You have to show up at this time. This is what's going to happen. In mediation, it's all about how we can help you and your ex-partner come to some resolution.